steps.
No, I'm doing the Foley work. You're the talent.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can
All
do
right.
that.
You have one. All right. Here we go.
words
All
to
right.
say.
So these are footsteps. Okay. Boom, boom. Those are car doors.
It's 106 miles to Chicago. We've got a full tank of gas, half a gig of memory cards. It's dark, and we're wearing sunglasses.
Hit it.
That's right. It is Teaching About the Great Lakes live from the Chicagoland area. We are in downtown Evanston. We are not at the Union Square Pizza because it is gross out. It is Midwest gross right now. And so instead we are inside at the Holiday Inn North Loop. No, not Loop. Is there a loop in there?
No, that's south of us.
No loop in there. But anyway, we're at the Holiday Inn in Evanston. Lovely accommodations, and they let us...
Thank you.
We're in the mezzanine, which sounds European, doesn't it? So that is
Very
fantastic. And the stuff is cold, the guests are good, and we're going to let it ride. So, as always, we have a very special... We're live from the Great Lakes Sea Grant Network meeting. I think I forgot to mention that. Yes!
Yay!
So for those of you out there who are not members, most of our audience is not Sea Grant. So there's a Sea Grant program in every coastal and Great Lakes state. And so we, every couple of years, pending national pandemic stuff, like to get together all the Great Lakes Sea Grant program. And we do networking, we do trainings, we do evening events from mezzanines and that sort of thing. And so that is what we're here doing this evening. But I am not by myself. I'm lucky to be joined tonight by our senior producer, Carolyn Foley. Carolyn, what is up?
Not much. I'm mildly disappointed that we're not eating pizza.
I am also disappointed that we're not eating pizza, but we're going to get to that in just a minute. So this is important. We're not eating pizza. We were supposed to be eating pizza. We're actually supposed to be eating Detroit-style pizza in Chicago.
Very
there are booze there.
suspicious.
We're going to get to that too. All right. That's what they had. That's not what we have. We're also joined tonight by Megan Gunn, our aquatic outreach associate.
Yes.
Megan Gunn, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Fine. Are you also disappointed to not be eating pizza?
I am, because now I'm a little bit hungry, and I wasn't hungry before, but...
So you always talk about pizza.
Yeah.
Well, here is the thing. Do you mind? No, don't.
There you go. Do you want me to... Not sure what your signals
I made
are.
a tilt your mic down motion to Megan, and she interpreted that as take a sip of whatever is in her blue cup.
It has the lakes on it, so it's very
does.
fitting
Great
for
mic cup. If you don't mind
event.
tilting your mic down so we can
Yeah.
get that primo audio quality.
Here you go.
Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to start tonight straight with business. This was something we planned before. And since we have no sound effects, we will add them in. This will be extra fun, but that's okay. We will wing it like Monty on the beach because we have a special list prepared for you tonight. This is Carolyn's top 5 styles of pizza because Carolyn is opinionated on pizza, apparently, and so she's going to give us her top 5. We're going to play a drum roll sound before each one, authentic sound effect, and then she's going to list the pizza type. And at the end, we will objectively evaluate her choices. Okay.
Right, so this was inspired by the fact that we are in the Chicago area and we were going to be at a Detroit-style pizza. Now, I grew up in Windsor. It's right across the river from Detroit. And everybody talks about Detroit-style pizza, which is like so-so.
Yeah.
It's so-so, for
Well,
being honest.
No, so you go. So here's the Detroit pizza we like. It's in Buddy's in Detroit. You guys say, isn't it Detroit? Is it?
Detroit.
I thought they said
But
Detroit.
they say Detroit in the. But anyway,
I thought it
doesn't
sounded like
matter
a local,
because
but the point is
Detroit style pizza is not that good. But you asked me what my top 5 styles of
All
pizza
right.
are, and the truth is, I don't even know if I have 5 that I would be.
Okay,
like,
I can
yeah.
fill in where you lose. All right, but anyway, number 5.
Chicago style deep dish. Yep, number 5 for sure.
Number 5.
Yeah,
So there's only 5, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one. Okay.
yeah.
Number 4.
See, you get yeah. The truth is, there are 3 styles of pizza that matter. I'm
Okay.
going to do it that way. You
All
can do
right,
your drum
the
roll
threes-
this way.
Hold
okay.
on. New thing. All right, first of all, this sounds like your Great Lakes factoid, so we're going to go ahead and play the Great Lakes factoid
It's a
music, which you
Great
can't
Lakes
hear because of the
factoid.
aforementioned sound
The
effects
Great
problem.
Lakes
So Carolyn's going to
factoid.
sing it.
Something about the Great Lakes. I'm just making the space.
Oh my God. Okay, Carolyn, what are the only 3 types of pizza that matter?
All right. Number 1.
Nope.
Sorry, go ahead.
Number 3.
Number 3. New York style, the super thin stuff that you can fold over
Yeah,
in
the
half.
best pizza. Okay, so the best pizza is number 3. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2.
Windsor-style pizza, which is a little
Doesn't
bit
exist.
chewy. It does.
Okay.
It absolutely 100% does, and if you haven't tried it, you should.
All right, so what is Windsor-style pizza?
It's like a little
It's got
bit
Canadian
chewy.
bacon.
No, it does not have Canadian bacon because Canadian bacon is not a thing. All right.
It's just
so
ham.
it's like a little bit chewier.
Little Timmy's on it.
It's like, no, it's a legit thing. Look it up. It wins awards, man. So it's like circular, like New York style. It's a little bit chewier crust. They use like a really nice thickness of cheese and toppings.
Great thickness of cheese.
It's
There's our
yeah,
title.
there you
Thank
go.
for
There's
that
your
one.
title. But
Yeah.
yes, that is Windsor style pizza. Look it up because it's legit. And the only reason that it's not number one is because number one is Neapolitan style pizza.
Neapolitan style pizza.
Yeah. I mean, and if anybody wants to argue that's fine.
So here's the question.
What is Neapolitan style?
It's like the thin, it's like thin oven baked
Yeah,
kind
it's like
of
your stone fired.
it's-
Like, yeah,
it's
that's very good. Second
yummy
best only in
stuff.
New York.
Yummy stuff.
So no, that's very good. But the one you're missing out, the one that's really critical, is Chicago actually does have a good kind of pizza, and it's not that casserole. It's the tavern-style thin crust Chicago pizza. That is the way to go. So you're welcome for that. We are now. It turns out I'm teaching you about the Great Lakes, but that's okay. Okay, Carolyn's top 5 styles of pizza / the only 3 styles that matter. That's enough of that. We are going to go straight into our interview. Now, this one's really special for a bunch of reasons. Sorry about that. We're really excited about this one, and here's why it was special, actually. I'm saying it was special. The reason it's special is, so we have different sort of theme song music that we play with different topics, and tonight we're going to talk about AIS, which means we get to play one of our AIS-related theme songs. And only I recognize that it's AIS-related because most of what I do here is solely to amuse myself, or maybe my wife, but she doesn't listen. And so that's fine. So now here is the AIS-related theme song, which is one of 2 versions of an old, like, sort of folk or country song called Crawdad Hole. And so I've recorded a few versions, instrumental versions of that. You get a line anyways, but crawdad because they're an invasive species. You may not know this.
Yeah, I mean, well.
Look at that!
Because I knew I would be on a podcast.
Love it.
Not that that's a visual medium, but, you know, felt appropriate.
Our guest today is Elle Lauer. Elle is the Glances Communication Specialist at Michigan Sea Grant over in Ann Arbor, Michigan, I suppose. Elle, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so in doing my research, I read that you often call yourself an invasion biologist, which sounds cool. Much cooler than like a environmental social scientist or what have you. But how does one become an invasion, and what is an invasion biologist? How do you become one? Or even more to the point, how do you become interested in invasion biology?
Well, I have always been interested in bad stuff happening. Long story short, I went in college. I did this kind of bizarre mixed media major, where it was more or less a build-your-own science communication degree. I really thought for a while that I was going to go into nuclear policy. That was too depressing, so I decided to study environmental toxins and invasive species instead. Long story short, I'm a Michigan native. I was born in Metro Detroit, and like a salmon returning to its ancestral stream, I have returned to the Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti area. And the Great Lakes are a huge part of my life. Water is life. And, issues with water are central to,
So why do you sound so happy with such a gloomy outlook?
Well, no, it's because, first, job security. Second of all,
There's always money in doomsaying. That's true.
yeah, but no, it's very interesting stuff. There's a huge number of issues facing the Great Lakes, but there's also a lot of really incredible collaborative work going on to solve some of these huge problems, and they're quite international, they're quite interdisciplinary, and it really lets you engage with a lot of folks who have very diverse backgrounds and come together to solve these big problems in a way that you don't really get in a lot of other fields. So I've really been enjoying that aspect of this work. But no, invasive species have always been very interesting to me. I was always the little kid who was out catching bugs and bringing lizards into the front yard and whatnot. But as wonderful as native species are, I've always been deeply intrigued by the ones that have been introduced. Why are they so good at making a life in a place that is completely alien to them? What are their impacts? What can we do about them? And how do we talk about them when we're sort of telling stories about how they impact the environment?
So do you have a favorite?
Honestly, sea lamprey are really fun organisms. I mean, they're...
That's one way to describe them, yes.
Well, they're fascinating, and if you look at them, they're actually kind of cute if you can get past the mouth. They've got like those very silly, googly eyes. I just think they're very charismatic for an invasive species. I mean, it's a great line into talking with people. Everyone wants to hear about these weird underwater vampires, and it's a great conversation starter, so I do have a strange bit of affection for them. Had one latch onto my arm at one point at some sort of outreach event, and it was fun.
Did it suck your blood?
No, I'm not a fish. So
That's fair.
I am not a fish.
I mean, just like a little nip, though.
Oh, I mean, it suckers on. It doesn't really bite. It's like, you're warm-blooded. I don't think so.
Very interesting. So a lot of collaborative work is done, and I'm guessing you do this at Glances.
Yes, indeed.
And we learned today that NOAA stands for the National Organization for the Advancement of Acronyms.
It absolutely does.
What the heck is GLANCES stand for, and what do you guys do there?
Okay, so GLANCES is the Great Lakes Aquatic Non-Indigenous Species Information System. Long story short, it is a database comprised of multiple tools to help us learn about all of the invasive species that have shown up so far in the Great Lakes, as well as some of the ones that may be on their way. There are, at last count, about 188, give or take a couple, because taxonomy keeps changing and we keep finding new weird things, established species in the region, or rather, established is a complicated term. We'll get into that later. And then about 100 more and counting that we've added to our watch list for species that, say, are in other parts of the region, or species that may be high risk but haven't made it to the basin themselves. So we've got everything from mapping tools to descriptions of life history, identification, regulations in the region that help keep these species out and stop them from spreading further. All kinds of tools, risk assessments to actually say, what are the impacts of these species, or what do we anticipate their impacts being when they're actually introduced to the region.
So 188 established species. What do you mean by established? Like, are those ones that have always been in the Great Lakes, or they've come and made their homes here, or what do you mean by that?
So these are non-indigenous species. Okay, so a little bit about terminology here. Established, in our case, we tend not to use that term on Glances even. It's useful shorthand for conversations like this, but it gets kind of complicated on the management and, quite frankly, legal front. What we mean by established is it's reproducing in the Great Lakes and it's able to overwinter. So something that shows up, like if you dropped some tropical species in here and...
Lionfish.
A lionfish. It can't find a mate, can't reproduce. It can't overwinter because, it's a tropical species and it likes warm water, and Great Lakes winters are brutal for all of us, including our aquatic invaders. So the species that we refer to on the non-indigenous list is more or less the established list. These are things that have come in from other places and been able to function and kind of make a life within the bounds of the basin itself.
Okay, so then, and that can be things that people wanted to introduce,
yes,
as well as things that were accidentally introduced.
Absolutely. Non-indigenous does not necessarily mean invasive. So, invasive species are those that cause socioeconomic and or ecological harm. Just because a species is introduced doesn't necessarily mean it's really going to do anything. At Glances we talk about, and the numbers are changing a little bit as we continue to do our assessments. Roughly a third of the species that are introduced qualify as invasive because they have these negative impacts. Roughly a third, they're relatively well studied, they're more or less naturalized, or they just don't really do anything. And roughly a third, we just don't have enough information about them to say one way or another.
So I feel like we never hear about this second type that are here, and it's kind of like whatever. Like a ginkgo tree would be an example, except for the males when they have the berries, those do some damage.
Smelly, yes.
Yeah. The females with the
was it the females?
Yeah,
I thought it was the males, I guess, because of the shape. Anyway, what is this middle type? What is the ginkgo of Lake Michigan or whatever?
Oh, gosh. Well, actually, if you want to be controversial about it, a lot of the fish that have been introduced for fisheries purposes, salmon.
Salmon.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we track all of the salmon species that have been introduced to the Great Lakes. That fishery was constructed.
Yes, Howard Tanner.
Yeah, absolutely. A fascinating story. I don't know if that's a thing that you've covered before, Rochelle.
Yeah, we've covered it with Brian Roth in episode... I will put a link in the show notes rather than make the live audience wait while I desperately Google our past episodes. But look in the show notes, which you can find at teachmeaboutthegreatlakes.com/88, because this is episode 88. People cower in front of they fear our release schedule. But anyway, listen to the first of 2 episodes with Teach Me About the Great Lakes Hall of Famer Brian Roth. So the point is, salmon are an example of the ginkgo of the Great Lakes.
Yes, beautiful, well-loved, but not native. And that's okay. Nativity is not the end-all, be-all of, environmental value. And that's perhaps a bit of a controversial take coming from an invasion biologist, but there you go. It's a more complex story than native thing good, non-native thing bad. There's a lot of social values that are involved in sort of making those decisions and how we respond to these species.
Okay, so what's an alien species?
An alien species is not from here. It can be good or bad. We try not to use that term these days. I mean, it's sort of confusing. There's a lot of terms that sort of are used synonymously, but perhaps not correctly. The legislature still talks about, alien species and whatnot. But we're trying to move away from that. It's kind of fun because, it conjures sort of sci-fi imagery, but it's not maybe the most accurate.
Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Why is it not accurate? I mean, they're from planet Earth. Maybe that's part of the reason.
Well, exactly.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, Megan just mentioned UFOs, but I feel like even UFOs aren't UFOs anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
Unidentified floating objects.
There we go. There's so many different. There are invasive jellyfish, right?
There certainly are. They're little cnidarians and they're weird little.
Wait, we have Great Lakes jellyfish?
We sure do.
Shut the front door.
No, it's true. Yeah, they've got a profile in Glances if you want to look them up. Freshwater jellyfish. Check it out. They don't really do much. They just kind of float around and freak people out.
So how
they don't sting.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm going to look them up. So I go to glances.com?
What is it? Noah. Gosh, I could pull up the URL.
Is it glaral.noaa.gov/glances?
That is correct.
That was my second guess.
Yes, there we go. Good work.
Because you scrolled up.
Okay. So one thing you're interested that I think is interesting, therefore we're going to talk about it, is this idea of how social values are wrapped up in this, right? Because this is, it's inherently a social construct. Because if you think about the idea of ecological succession or whatever, at some point we were all invasive species, right? Or non-native species. And so maybe alien species, the meteorite thing. But, and so we inherently are working in, so the social thing comes in a couple ways. One is we're inherently working within the framework and the viewpoint of our current lives and societies and philosophies and whatever. But two, you can also feel the social values that we attach to species and to the environment wrapped up in the language that we use, I think. And even just these conversations. And so I was a lit major, useful, good call. And now I study communication and media framing and things like that. So I think a lot about the language that we use. And you hear that sort of wrapped up in the discussion of invasive species, right? And I think you've done some work or have talked before about the use of, is it militaristic language you use? Maybe it's paternalistic, all the different language we use. Tell us about that a little.
Sure. So an increasing part of my work in the last couple of years has been on the rhetoric of invasive species.
Would have been a better major.
My mentor was a rhetorician, so it's kind of funny that I'm looping back around to that, although I went the environmental science track. But yeah, so two of the things you brought up here is, one is militaristic metaphors. I mean, invasion itself is a military term. It's this idea of, evil foreign invaders coming to our home and taking our resources away from our precious native species and whatnot. And then the other one is nationalistic, which goes kind of hand in hand with the military metaphors. It's kind of difficult to disentangle them. But again, it's this idea that foreign bad, native good, and how dare something come in from the outside and rob us of our precious resources and take things from species that deserve it because they belong here. So you can see how this rhetoric can get very politically awkward given our current situation, and invokes some uncomfortable parallels with anti-immigration messages and again, this idea of something not being from here being inherently bad or suspicious somehow.
And that's kind of led to a lot of the name changes, right? So there are things that we could be eating, but because it has this negative first name to it, people don't want it because it's quote unquote bad.
Oh yeah. There's the species naming. That's the other big part. In addition to sort of the metaphors that are used in science communication, we're also talking a lot about species names. And so that's both common and scientific names. The taxonomy is changing all the time, but the common names are really what we're kind of focusing on.
Well, the species names are really freaking hard, right, to deal with, because those are oftentimes listed in the books. And I bet there's commissions. There could be congresses on this. There's got to be a congress on it. I remember I was at the University of Georgia getting my master's in fish bio. Because that's what you do. It's either that or Starbucks as a lit major. And you don't want to work at Starbucks anymore. But the point is this, is at the time somebody there, Dr. Gary Grossman is his name, was leading, I don't know if he's leading, but he's very active in the charge to get what is now called the Goliath grouper changed. It had a different name at the time.
Yes, very unfortunate former name on that one.
And it was very hard, and it was just the common name. But the species names, those are often really almost impossible, even when they're named after eugenicists or racists or people who, to speak in a value-neutral way, people who maybe modern mores would say we shouldn't be naming species after, right? So is that why the focus is more on common names, or?
Exactly.
Okay.
Taxonomy is... It's complicated. The professional societies are involved with a lot of the taxonomy discussions. But when it comes to common names, there's all kinds of groups that can actually get involved, including community science groups. Everything, websites from iNaturalist, places where you can report invasive species, EdMaps. So it's a much more collaborative thing. And when common names are used among a bit of a broader audience, and it's also what science communicators tend to use. If you're talking to the public, it helps to have a catchier name, and something a little easier to memorize than the Latin binomial. So that can really be a way to, push some positive change and change some of these common names that may not have been thought through so well originally, or that, social mores have changed around a bit.
Or even just things that people, you didn't intend for all this kind of backlash to happen around a name because you're just saying, oh, this is from a place that we assume it's from there, so we're going to name it that, but then there are different repercussions. So before we get to your question, I did want to ask, so in Illinois, which is where we are right now, they are marketing a particular fish as kopi.
Yes.
So what happens? Right across the border in Indiana, are they going to be like, what the heck's a kopi? And so are they running into issues like that?
That's a great question. It's very interesting because this is not by any stretch of the imagination. When we're talking about kopi, by the way, if you haven't heard about this, that is the name for marketing invasive carp. I believe specifically bighead and silver, not so much grass carp or black carp. Anyway, what we're talking about with invasive carp is also called Asian carp. I'm specifically not using that term because it isn't helpful, and if you talk to a lot of people who are researching these species, it's a bit ridiculous to call, anywhere between 4 or 7 different species that happen to be from Asia or Eurasia, have totally different life histories, totally different impacts, all Asian carp. It's just not a very useful category, but what it does is sort of impose stigma based on their continent of origin rather than focusing on the actual different kinds of negative impacts they have. It sort of adds an unnecessary degree of confusion to communication about these harmful species.
Do they have different impacts? Or is it, so you might want to lump them together because it's like all these invasive carp is lumping them together, right? You're just lumping them together there. But are there different impacts where it makes sense to speak on a more sort of individual species level?
Oh, sure. There's the big-headed carp. That's the sort of subcategory within that, and that's silver and big-head carp. Those are the ones that jump out of the water and clock boaters upside the head, and so you get the dramatic photos of those.
I was going to say, you have seen this video before.
Okay, so go to the show notes right now. We've done this on Ask Dr. Fish, too. Whenever it comes up, I want to be very clear. we cannot and do not endorse this behavior. And so what we're showing, what you're going to look at in the show notes is, one way of looking at it is this is a horrible animal rights issue. It is abuse of animals that are just reacting in a very natural way, and that is true. It's also extremely dangerous. There's another way of looking at this, which is these videos are kind of funny. And so what it is like dudes on like skis with like tennis rackets or broadswords or maybe spears. And they're whacking at all of these jumping carps. And so we're putting a link to that. We are not endorsing it. We are saying that it is potentially an animal rights issue, I say after eating my turkey sandwich for dinner. But anyway, so your point is this. We have the big head carp. They have one set of threats to people and to the ecosystem potentially. Yes. But the silver carp or the other carp, is different?
Big head and silver are the ones that tend to jump, specifically the silver carp. But say grass carp, for instance. Yeah. The problem with them is that they are just like absolutely bottomless pits for vegetation. They will eat all of the vegetation in your ecosystem. In fact, that is why they were introduced in the first place.
Intentionally,
they were brought into, for aquaculture purposes, like clearing weeds out of waterways and stuff like that. And I mean, there's a really great, now I can't remember the book. Anyway, got into the story of how grass carp were introduced and then were sort of let go when they made their way up the Mississippi and, eating all the plants in their path.
I think you're thinking of Dan Egan's, is it Death in Life?
Death in Life of the Great Lakes. It's a very good book. Highly recommended.
It is very good.
Okay, so is there a candidate? We sort of talked about this earlier that, you have some that you're keeping an eye on.
Yeah.
Is there a candidate for kind of the next invader of the Great Lakes?
Oh, can we set that up first? Is that okay?
Sure.
So managing Great Lakes invasives, now I'm just nervous to even say, whenever I see you, I get nervous now, Elle, because I'm going to use the wrong word.
I have an endorsement while you think about your words.
What's your endorsement?
So my endorsement is if you are an educator and would like to rent a jumping carp costume to have at your school, we at Illinois Indiana Sea Grant have a jumping carp costume.
What if you're a father of 3 and Halloween is coming up?
You would have to talk to our education lead.
There you go, Halloween outreach special. I love it.
All right, so my question, all right, so really managing invasives has been kind of a success story in the last while. Like, Sea Grant does a ton of work. So part of the reason we're having Elle on is Sea Grant throughout the Great Lakes just does a ton of work on outreach related to, we have a lot of Stop Aquatic Hitchhikers, Be a Hero Transports. There are all these different work we do, ranging from working with individual anglers to aquarium shops to school groups, and the amount of work we're doing is going up, not down. And it's been a large success. So roughly, since you log on to Glances, which tracks all this every day, I assume in the morning you check the latest Glances dailies. And you look at the dailies, how many new species have we tracked in the last, 10 or 20 years in the Great Lakes?
Oh, God. Well, Glances has been around for close to 20 years at this point. Rochelle Sturdivant is the current program manager, and we'll be able to give you a few more details on that. The good news is, though, as far as success stories from the last 20 years, ballast water invasion has gone way, way down thanks to the hard work of many of our colleagues at GLERL, actually. We just recently recognized Dave Reed for his hard work. Tom Johengen was also involved with that, with the ballast water exchange systems. And so this is, I'm not sure how much your listeners know about this, but
I know nothing, so let's help me.
Okay, cool. So when goods are shipped internationally, you can bring them across the ocean and up to the St. Lawrence Seaway into the Great Lakes. This is all wonderful. But many, the thing about these big tanker ships is they're heavy. So to compensate for the weight of the actual goods and supplies that they're carrying and help balance the ship, they have these ballast tanks. So they suck up water to, help balance the weight when they are unloaded, and they release the water when they are loaded. And it's just this whole system of keeping your ship from capsizing.
Your ship.
Which is a good thing.
Yes. Problem is, of course, when these big tankers are sucking up water, sometimes they suck up plants and animals along with that. And so it's a really great way for species to unwittingly be transported internationally between these different bodies of water. With the development of ballast water exchange, basically there were some regulations put in place that said, okay, you're going from a freshwater body to a freshwater body, And we know that species can hitchhike, and then when you release that ballast water, they can be introduced to this new environment. This causes many problems. So ballast water exchange was implemented. So when these big tanker ships are in the open ocean, they pull in salt water, and a lot of freshwater organisms do not like salt water whatsoever. Yeah. This kills them quite effectively. But even after they implemented this, there were still some issues. There were still species getting in, and everyone was going, how? Why is this happening? I thought ballast water exchange was working. Well, it turns out they're not just pulling up water, they're also pulling up some sediment. At the bottom of these tanks, there's this layer of silty sludge, and things like little mussels, little invertebrates, stuff like that, stuff that can survive in like these low oxygen environments, were sometimes managing to kind of take refuge in this sludge. Yeah. And so, basically it was, sorry, I think I got the story a little bit backwards with the ballast water exchange thing. There was a couple of different treatments that they actually implemented to treat the sludge and be sure that the sludge was not harboring these organisms here, so the tanks were actually getting flushed properly. And that actually basically stopped ballast water as a vector of invasion just in the last 20 years. So cool. It's really quite a remarkable success, and a lot of hard work and engineering went into that, and collaboration between both Great Lakes scientists, but also the shipping industry, and legislation. So it was a real story.
So is that a regulatory issue? Is it?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I think that's the no bob. So no ballast on board. So, really wonderful story, and we're hoping that we can find similar successes for other invasion pathways, though it's a little more complicated when you're talking about stuff like talking to folks who are involved in aquarium keeping about maybe not dumping their goldfish into waterways. We all know we shouldn't. That doesn't stop people sometimes, though.
So we know that the Great Lakes are special, and we know about the ballast issues. Like, they've done the things, but what makes the Great Lakes so susceptible to these aquatic invaders just taking over?
Well, it's specifically industry, the shipping, as well as the fact that the Great Lakes have been connected in some unusual artificial ways. So we have the Welland Canal, so connecting the St. Lawrence Seaway to the kind of rest of the Great Lake, getting around Niagara Falls really opened up the invasion pathway to the rest of the lakes. And then, of course, we have the connection to the Mississippi River. So we've got that other connection. We've got the carp coming up the Mississippi River. We've got here in Chicago, the Chicago Sanitary and Sewage Canal that basically reversed the flow of the river and artificially connected these waterways. So there's just a lot more opportunities for things to get in. Also, a lot of our invaders are from basically Central Europe or Eurasia. And that just happens to be a region that's kind of climactically similar to the Great Lakes. The same reason that a lot of, human immigrants came over from Europe and settled here in the Great Lakes.
Sorry,
What's that?
Oh, I'm from the South, so I'm sorry about the climate. That's all. So maybe it's... Oh, wait, so it's European gross out right now. That sounds much nicer, doesn't it?
I mean, sort of northern Germany weather. Anyway, but it's in the same way that human immigrants came over and were like, a lot of German folks came over to the Cincinnati area. My family is in Cincinnati, and we happen to be German. And we're like, oh, wow, this landscape looks kind of familiar. We can grow things that we used to grow there and, make a pretty good life out here. The species that are originally, native to the Ponto-Caspian region, and that's, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, all the sort of waterways in Europe and Eurasia, also kind of adapt similarly. They're like, here's some nice fresh water that has climactically similar patterns and freeze and thaw cycles, and I can make a life here just fine.
That's very similar to my story. So I have a multiple choice question for you. Actually, this one's important.
All right, so setting up the multiple choice question. We are once again on the shores of Lake Michigan.
Indeed.
And Lake Michigan has been drastically influenced by an invasive species called Dreissenids.
Well, this is a much less fun way than just popping the question.
Look, I'm doing it for the audience, all right.
Well, no, that's fine. And so the point is this, and Lake Superior, I hope you're listening right now. We interviewed Lake Superior several months ago, a couple years ago. Lake Michigan's the cleanest Great Lake. Take that, Superior. But my question is this. Some people think that Lake Michigan is too clean. I've heard this before from highly placed sources. So I have a multiple choice question. Is the water in Lake Michigan, A, too clean, B, not too clean, or C, just the right amount of clean?
I would like to go with option D. It depends on what you're measuring.
D for depends. All right, well, tell me about option D. It depends on what we're measuring.
Okay, so you sort of set me up to talk about Dreissenid mussels.
D for Dreissenid.
D for Dreissenid. Yeah, so that would be the part of all this that was making the water a little too clean. So Dreissenid mussels, of course, that's zebra mussels and quagga mussels, the annoying little guys that are all over the shore, stick to pipes, stick to boats,
so there's
generally
a language,
cause problems.
annoying little guys. Okay, fine. That's fine, but I just want to point out. The invaders are guys, are they? Yeah, so.
Guys, gender neutral. I have no idea about the gender of a zebra mussel. But
look at the little foot. I don't know.
Yeah,
Anyway,
they're funny. Anyway, long story short, these little organisms are out here in the millions and millions sucking up the nutrients that a lot of our native species actually, need. And so some may argue that they clean the water a bit too much. This is sometimes useful for people who are interested in, say, snorkeling, scuba diving, checking out some of the great shipwrecks up in Alpena and whatnot, because the water's crystal clear. It looks tropical. Unfortunately, for our native species, that means that there's just not as much algae, plankton, and other nutrients out there for them to consume, and that can really negatively impact them because the mussels are kind of hogging all of that. Now, when it comes to other kinds of pollution, I think we've actually been trending in a directionally correct way, as far as maybe not dumping raw sewage into the lake so much as we have done historically. I did a little work in grad school on Great Lakes areas of concern, and I have to say that things are looking a lot cleaner even in the last 10 years since I've gotten out of school, and that's been encouraging to see. So definitely, it depends on what you're measuring.
Okay, that's a fine and nuanced answer. Here's my other question, always with AIS, is it is inherently like a human timescale issue, right? Because in the very long run, all of this stuff is going to be different because ecosystems change.
Sure.
Right? So and on top of that, we have all of these ships coming in and they're successfully exchanging their ballast water, and most, we're doing a survey on this now with our good friend Tim Campbell of Wisconsin Sea Grant.
Oh, yes.
And it looks like many boaters are reporting that they perform the 5 steps, clean, jar, dry, or whatever. And so that's good. But I mean, it just takes 2, baby, right? And so
sometimes one if it's parthenogenic.
Yeah. And so, are we just spitting in the wind here? Are we just like trying to delay the inevitable with all of this work? This is what I worry about. In the long run, there are going to be more invaders. Maybe not carp. Maybe all of this will prevent the carp, but something else. So what is tell me the reason for hope with this, I guess, on this particular issue.
I think the ballast water thing is actually one of the best reasons we've got out there. We actually succeeded at a technological intervention that really, really helped multiple invasive species. It's keeping new ones out. It's preventing, ones that have come over. It's basically stopping this exchange. The sea lamprey story and the development of, targeted lampricides is another really great story. It took the Great Lakes Fishery Commission a while to develop, basically a toxin that would affect lampreys without killing a whole bunch of other fish there. These parasitic fish had devastated a lot of our native populations. In fact, some of our native Great Lakes species were completely extirpated and even went extinct due to the invasion of the sea lamprey. With the invention of these lampricides, we actually are managing to keep the populations under control to a manageable degree. We'll never be able to fully get rid of them, and this is the reason it's important to keep the funding coming, because it takes a lot of active work, funding, and international collaboration, quite frankly, to keep lampreys at a manageable level so we can maintain our fisheries. But it's working, and it's been wonderful. So we have these success stories, and it's really important to keep those in mind. Now, there's always going to be an aspect of, as long as human trade and travel exists in the modern world as it does, stuff's going to be coming in. We are always moving species, moving goods, and there's always unintended consequences. But the amount of collaboration that goes on in this region in particular is very inspiring, and who knows what problem we'll face next. But we've got, I think, the right people for the job to think about solutions to these future issues.
So what I'm hearing you say is humans are the problem, but also the solution.
Absolutely. I think we got to take responsibility for how we've changed the environment, and that's one of the things that I always talk about with regards to invasive species. They're not malicious. They're just little animals and plants trying to make a life. It's not their fault that they were brought here, and they're certainly not setting out to intentionally harm other organisms, the economy, the environment, anything like that. It's a consequence of human actions, and so because we are responsible for it, let's, make an effort and clean up our mess.
Well, this is fascinating, and we've been wanting to have you on the show for a couple of years, just in general, and then I think was it last year at the Carefully Enunciated JASM conference.
Yes.
You had a great session. So like many people couldn't make it because of travel issues. Half of the conference had COVID, and Elle led a session though, like an impromptu kind of session that was among the best conference sessions I've ever been in.
Oh,
and I got
shucks.
there, and I was like, "This is really great. Elle is amazing." I fired off an email to the Michigan Sea Grant director and said, "This is really great. Elle is amazing." So we've got to get Elle on the show, and then I forgot about it until like a week ago. And so all that's good. And so I'm really glad you come on and share all of this interesting work you do. You're a font of knowledge about invasive species, and the way that you're thinking about language stuff is really leading the way. And I think it's fascinating and important work, and will influence in the long run how we communicate about this stuff. So that's fine. But that's not why we invited you here on Teach Me About the Great Lakes this week. The reason that we invited you on Teach Me About the Great Lakes is to ask 2 questions. And the first one, I have a feeling I'm about to be scooped on.
Nope.
Oh, I thought you were highlighting it.
Nope.
For you. Well, good. I'm asking the first question. It's a host's privilege. If you could choose to have a great donut for breakfast or a great sandwich for lunch, which one would you choose?
Well, I would definitely have to pick the sandwich, but I'd also have the sandwich for breakfast. I don't have much of a sweet tooth. While I appreciate a good donut, it is much better as a late afternoon pick-me-up with a cup of coffee. A sandwich is an anytime food.
That's perfect. So you're in Ann Arbor. I'm going to go to Ann Arbor. I'm going to wake up early and go to Zimmerman's. I'm going to wait in line for 42 minutes, pay $19 for a cup of coffee, and I'm going to enjoy that coffee. And then I'm going to go about my business for a little while. And while I'm doing my business, I'm going to get hungry, and then I'm going to want to go to lunch. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going back to Zimmerman's because I already gave them enough money. And who has time for that?
Okay.
Where should I go in Ann Arbor to get a really good sandwich?
Oh, man. Okay, because Zingerman's was what I was going to recommend, but here's the secret.
Oh, I said Zinger. F. Stuart. Zingerman's.
Zingerman's.
No, I know it's Zingerman's. It's late. The point is this. I've already gone to Zingerman's and Zimmerman's. I've gone to everything.
There you go.
Zimmerman's was in Athens, Georgia.
Yes.
Zimmerman's. They had really good bagels there.
Yeah.
And you didn't have to wait that long. You just walk in and bought them, and you left. It was a reasonable price. The Morning Glory muffin, rock solid.
That is not in the Great Lakes.
No, it's not in the Great Lakes. And so then I'm going to go to Zingerman's. Do all that same stuff I mentioned. Sub in Zingerman's for Zimmerman's. 86 it. The point is this. Where am I going for lunch?
I would recommend Detroit Street Filling Station, whether you are vegan or not. It is all vegan, but as I am an omnivore, it is a great option for people with dietary restrictions or who just enjoy really good plant-based food. They have a Reuben that, while the Zingerman's Reubens are unparalleled, highly recommended, the best way to get a Zingerman sandwich is to have it catered when you're at a conference at GLERL.
There you go.
And so you don't have to wait the 42 minutes in line drinking your $19 coffee. If you would prefer an alternative, they've got a really good tempeh Reuben, so highly recommended.
I love a solid tempeh Reuben. I'm not even going to lie. And the Detroit Street Filling Station also recommended on Teach Me About the Great Lakes episode, whatever one I'm looking at right now, 70, by Laura Rubin of the Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition. So it comes well recommended.
Very
Detroit
good.
Street, and a tempeh Reuben, a tofu Reuben, all your alternate Reubens, very, very good. I'm on board with that.
So, what is a special place in the Great Lakes that you'd like to share with our audience? And what makes it special? Special?
Zimmerman's is special.
What makes it special?
Oh, man. Well, I'm going to... this is kind of a cheesy story, but, I'm cheesy,
That's
so
the
it
point
works
of this
out.
one. We want the cheesy story.
It's great. Anyway, no. So I have spent quite a bit of time on Lake Huron, but more specifically on the Canadian side. My wife is Canadian, and so we bopped around quite a bit of Ontario. But we actually got engaged on the shores of Lake Huron at Point Farms. So lovely little campsite. The mosquitoes laid off. It was just nice sunset, and we decided we were going to get married. And Lake Huron is our witness, and it's a great place. So the Great Lakes are very close to my heart for many reasons.
That's awesome.
just opening my Lake Huron notebook today. The first thing I'm going to write in it is this place to visit. So that's fantastic.
No, there's some really good camping on the Canadian side. The Pinery is another good option. Highly recommended.
Highly recommended.
You can actually find camping spots, unlike on the U.S. side.
That is super. Well, Elle Lower, the Glance's communications specialist at Michigan Sea Grant. Sage, the AIS, the AI Sage. Thank you so much for coming on and teaching us all about the Great Lakes.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, yeah, that was really great. Really fascinating stuff. Before we go, we do have a couple of announcements. Number one, and this is the most important one. Had I been more organized, had I been taller, had I been better looking, we would have this ready to go right now, and I'd make all of you vote. But the Lakey Award nominations are, by the time this episode is up, going to be open. So for those of you who do not know, the Lakeys the slogan is quite possibly not the least prestigious Great Lakes-related podcast awards. And we are taking your nominations in categories ranging from like Great Lakes Outreach of the Year, Great Lakes Science of the Year, coolest thing you learned on Teach Me About the Great Lakes Animal of the Year, Great Lakes Non-Animal of the Year, and this year we have the return of maybe the best category, which is Great Lakes Titus of the Year. And so this is good. We have a returning runner-up from Great Lakes Titus of the Year. We'll see what happens. And so...
All right, so just for the record, the Lakeys episode from last year, if you want to hear something absolutely ridiculous, recommend listening to that episode, particularly for the Great Lakes Titus of the Year.
Yes, we love Dr. Fish. In fact, if you want to hear more from Titus, just go to AskDrFish.com, live every other month, probably. More or less. But so please, so look in your show notes or go to bit.ly/Lakey, or bit.ly, they took away the bit.ly.com, bit.ly/Lakeys23, hopefully, I haven't actually gotten it, no. And you can vote on your Lakey Award. That will be super good. And we have a thank you to the Great Lakes Sea Grant Network, and thank you to the Holiday Inn for taking us as this North German weather made it challenging for us to host this outside. And with that, Teach Me About the Great Lakes is brought to you by the fine people of Illinois Indiana Sea Grant, and we encourage you to check out the cool stuff we do at iiseagrant.org and at ILIN Sea Grant on Facebook, Twitter, and other social media.
Our senior producer is Carolyn Foley, and Teach Me About the Great Lakes is produced by Hope Charters, Megan Gunn, and Renee Miles. Ethan Chitty is our associate producer and fixer. Our super fun podcast artwork,
which is also on some stickers if anybody wants any.
Please grab a sticker. By Joel Davenport. The show is reluctantly edited by Stuart Carlton while we find someone to replace the irreplaceable Quinn Rose.
If you have a question or comment about the show, please email it to teachmeaboutthegreatlakes@gmail.com or leave a message on our always smoking super busy hotline at 765-496-4474. Seriously, somebody please call.
I mean, it could be, I feel like the negative talk is not helping the hotline. I feel like we should be boosting the poor hotline, and here are saying unkind things about it. How does the hotline feel? It feels invaded. That's how the hotline feels. It feels...
Hey, simmer down. Or is it non-native? All right. Okay, yes, please leave a message on our hotline. The best hotline ever.
How hard was that?
496-4474. You can also follow the show on Twitter, that we will call Twitter forever, at Teach Great Lakes. But like the Great Lakes, that place is feeling pretty invaded these days. Thanks for listening, and keep grading those lakes.
Closing theme, and we're good.
Thank you for bearing with us.
Yeah, this was they're always interesting. Each one in their own specific... Oh! Rats.
What?
I have a question.
Yeah,
so we have the Kopi. Right? Kopi.
Oh, we never followed up with the Kopi.
No, that's okay. We don't follow up on anything. It's fine. And so we have the Kopi. And so they're trying to eat up the Kopi.
Yes.
Right? Even though it tastes...
deliciously like whatever you cook it in.
Exactly.
Right, it's like tilapia. If they can market tilapia, you can market Kopi, I'm sure.
Okay.
Does anyone want to give me some
No, we got
Kopi?
some carb. We go to the Noah Fish Fry, and so someone, I won't say who he is, but he's taller than I am and directs our program. he got and we got some carp and we got it smoked and it was pretty good on like a cracker or whatever.
Sure.
But he kept talking about how he wanted to make it into a mousse, and that just sounds gross. Right, a carp
It's
mousse?
a little fine dining, like, pike mousse. It's all fancy
You're not
French
helping
cuisine.
out, right.
Okay, no.
What kind of mousse?
I
Chocolate.
love cooking. I don't know. Here's the plug I'm putting in. Are you familiar with Freshwater Feasts from Michigan Sea Grant, perchance?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. It's a Great Lakes recipe blog. It's great.
It is.
Oh yeah, I do know that actually. Oh no, I didn't know the title. I'm not into titles.
I author some recipes for it from time to time, and so if anyone wants to hook me up with some kopi, I have emailed the kopi people, and they have kind of ghosted me. But I'm like, give me some kopi, I will develop some recipes. I love to cook. I mean, the bear is like my favorite thing.
We hear.
Just drive your boat in the Wabash River with a net.
I am so serious. If you give me kopi, I will develop you recipes. Let's go.
Awesome. All right.
Give someone kopi and you'll fish for life. So developing recipes. Speaking of that, so one of the things that many people love to do in Eastern Europe is to eat gobies, right? And
No.
So here's the thing.
Just say no.
Here's the thing. So the thing about gobies, have you seen a ground goby before?
Yes.
And so they're kind of like hot dog shaped, right?
I see you're leading into your shirt topic.
So my question is this. Are you looking for an investment? This is my question for you. So they're hot dog shaped. So my idea is that we take them and we put them in a hot dog bun. And we're in Chicago. Why are we not doing this?
I mean, you get the sport peppers on a round goby.
Yeah,
Surely this would improve the situation significantly.
You get the pickle. What else? The celery salt?
Relish. The green relish, onion.
Mustard.
No ketchup. No ketchup.
And then you have a goby dog.
I'd eat it.
Who does not buy this?
Anyone who doesn't like a little bit of crunch.
Yeah, there's crunch, and they claim that it's loaded with PCBs and everything.
The PFAS, yeah.
But I know that it's huge in Eastern Europe. Is the thing. This is what I'm told from John Jansen on Teaching About the Great Lakes episode, whatever. And so,
I mean,
we
I
eat
come.
contaminants and everything else, so goby dogs should be no different.
this is kind of what I'm
Who
thinking.
can say? I mean, I'd be down to try it. I come from a family who used to keep the Christmas carp in the bathtub, so.
The Christmas carp?
Oh, you guys don't know about that?
No.
Oh yeah, no, this is a German Eastern European thing.
This is why you're used to the weather.
Carp soup for Christmas. It's
Carp
a thing.
soup
I
for
promise
Christmas.
you.
It is
Yeah,
a
it's
thing. Many things are things.
There's certainly things, but yes, no. I mean, carp are a valuable food fish in many parts of the world, and so I'm absolutely on board with this whole kopi thing. It runs in the family.
So what I worry about with this, though, why are we doing the show again?
But I
The
have
show's
so
over.
many
But what I
questions.
worry about with this is, like, I think it's fun to think about, but has any invasive species ever been eaten out of existence, like extirpated? I just don't think it happens, right? And then, I mean, no matter how many goby dogs you sell or how many mussels frites you sell, whatever, like, I mean, are you aware of a time where that's, I mean, it's a good PR. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done, but sometimes I wonder if we're, like, doing all this, a dog and pony show for something that is only, we should recognize it as PR. Is that fair?
Yeah, but PR is good, actually. I mean, I do a lot of stuff with... No. Okay, you set me up here. No, this is... I am a huge believer in... some people will say that eating invasive species is a perverse incentive. I am of the if you can't beat it, eat it school. I also do some... I'm a forager. I'm always out here pulling garlic mustard and turning it into pesto when I'm not, out doing Great Lakes stuff.
Basil exists, right?
What's that?
Basil exists.
Oh, certainly, but, it's not growing everywhere in your local parks and choking out your native wildflowers. So, big believer in, making use of what you've got on hand, and I would much rather see something be eaten than, just buried in a landfill somewhere. I mean, there's still animals and plants, and I would like to respect their lives and at least, get some nutritional content out of it. So as long as they're not loaded with forever chemicals, bring it on.